Welcome to the latest edition of the Shukri Wrights podcast with your host, Shukri Wrights. First and foremost, happy holidays to all of you who are listening to this podcast. And I am very thrilled to have on the podcast today Mr. Al Morganti, who is the host of the pre and pros game show for Flyers hockey on NBC Sports Philadelphia, co-host of Angelo and the gang in the morning on 94.1 WIP in Philadelphia. Mr. Morganti, good. Al, how are you doing today?
Doing fine. Tough season, tough holiday season, but hockey's around the corner, so I'm happy.
I'm definitely happy to hear that. Trust me, hockey could not have come back at a better time, especially with the NBA returning. Hockey, it's been like, okay, like when is it coming back? And now that those questions have been answered, I'm excited. So like, what's the wait been like for you? We're waiting to hear like when the NHL is going to return.
Well, it's been like everybody else. You're on pins and needles. And even at this point, with what's going on in Canada, nothing's locked down, I guess. The only thing locked down is the people. Everything else is kind of, what's the term, fluid on what's going to happen. We're getting through the NFL season. We got through a baseball season. College football is the murkiest, I guess, of everything that's happened.
Yeah.
And hockey, they had a playoff. So I guess what you have to do is make the best of a situation and realize you're looking at a studio show, as no fans or minimal amount of fans, and just enjoy the entertainment. If you have to only have a concert online, if you have to watch whoever it is online, you do it until something gets better. No sense in complaining all the time, right?
For sure. And this whole wait for me, it's been one of those things where it's like, come on, hurry up now. Come on. Like I need something. Like give me some good news here. And finally when the news broke, it was just like, oh, thank goodness. Now we have something that's concrete. We know when it's coming back. It's a matter of the players returning to their home cities for whichever team that they play for.
Yeah, it's like finally, after complaining that there was nothing, now we'll have something to complain about when they actually start playing. So at least it'll be a more normal complaint, right? It won't be the ones we're not used to. Now it's the complaining that we actually are look forward to doing.
Absolutely. And the phrase at least we'll have something to complain about again is the part that's like, yeah, during hockey season, there's every fan base has got something to complain about. And I had the chance to do some research and I discovered that you're from Boston. Like,
I grew up in Needham. I went to
nice.
My last college was Boston University. Spent some time at Babson and elsewhere, and lived in Charlestown when I was at BU. And
nice.
I'm old enough that I'm really, really friendly with the 1980 Olympic guys: Jackie O'Callahan, Ruzioni, Davey Silk, all those guys. So I go back home a lot. This is the first year since I can remember, since I must have been 6 or whatever, that I wasn't at Fenway Park in the summer. Wow. Every summer I've gone up. I've gone to the. I know it's a joke. I live in Philadelphia. I go up to the parades there, and everybody gets upset here. Of course, I was with the Eagles when they beat, covering the Eagles when they beat the Patriots. But you never. Yeah. I find just as people from Philadelphia never leave, even if they move away, I've never really moved out of that area, having grown up with the Red Sox, the Bruins, Celtics, to a lesser extent, the Patriots. I like both cities. I love both cities. My feet are right now in Philadelphia, but my heart's always in Boston.
That's amazing. Tell me about your upbringing and what led you to have such an affinity for sports.
Well, I was like most kids. Growing up in the 60s, watching the Red Sox, playing Little League, playing hockey in the various leagues around. Everybody just did it. I love the competitive aspect of it. I guess my scouting report in any sport will be small but slow. So I wasn't going to get anywhere. I really wasn't going to get anywhere. And I tried out for a couple of hockey teams here and there. Went to a certain level, went to BU, tried to, whatever. I was so out of my league there. But wow. I got to say, when I was at BU, I started to work for the newspaper there because I knew, I couldn't cut it on the ice. But I love the sport, having grown up with the Bruins. And one of the guys that was kind of pretty influential, was Jackie Parker, the coach, who even at that level, treated you as a professional, even as a student reporter at a newspaper that was independent, the Daily Free Press. So, I mean, I got to cover a team there, made strong relationships with the guys on that hockey team from O'Callahan, Ruzioni, all those guys, and kind of just went that way. And it's amazing to me that everything that I've done in my life, every job, I have made through connections through hockey. Even the radio jobs I've had, the newspaper, I've always, it's always served me well. I covered every sport, but when I walked into a hockey locker room, it may have changed over time now, as I think there's more Americans than Canadians. You walk in, they say, "Hey, how you doing? How's your family doing?" It was a completely different vibe than other sports that I covered. And I found that those are relationships that have lasted through the years. So they were born at hockey rinks in Boston. And unfortunately, I got to cover Olympics. I went around the world covering hockey. And even though people consider it nothing like the NBA in terms of interest, but I found the community very, very welcoming. When you look at what the hockey media, I think part of it was we all felt like we're trying to spread the good word about the game, kind of the gospel of the game, if you will. So we didn't want to trash it ever. Even at the mistakes that the league made, it was like we saw the good people involved. And when I look now, I see all of these, more women want to get involved with sports or whatever. Well, I covered the sport with women from day one. From the New York Times to the LA Times, women have always covered the sport. I guess it was like an entry level is what it looked like at the time, but it's been the most welcoming to me. I'm amazed when other sports are going through this, like this group has to get in, that group. Hockey said, "Hey, you're all welcome. Come on, have fun. We want everybody to love our sport."
And you mentioned about like hockey being such a welcoming sport. I mean, regardless of wherever you come from or whatever your background may be. And like one of the things that I've learned, especially being involved with the sport and even talking about it almost on a regular basis, is that there's a level of passion that's involved. And especially regardless of what team that you may love. You talked about growing up in Greater Boston, growing up in Needham, and obviously like me being here in Boston, you got the Bruins, and the Bruins being such a polarizing team, especially in the early 70s with the big bad Bruins. Like, what are your recollections of that era?
Well, I was lucky enough to watch them. It was, look, the sport was vicious then. And I think it's when you really look at the sport, it's tremendous live because it's best played right on the edge of mayhem. You don't want mayhem, but right at the edge of it. And it's cleaned up some of the bad hits or whatever. But I think people loved it originally because even if when you went to the game, you could say to yourself, "I don't care what they paid me. I ain't stepping on that ice. It's too dangerous." And it was like, it also gave us, people sometimes get upset when they see players shaking hands after a game, and hockey does it after playoff series.
Yes.
But you could tell if you haven't played it, you're at a bit of a disadvantage because even if you're playing intramural or beer league, as they say, there's going to be a scrap. It's just, you're dealing with guys with, sticks in their hands and knives on their feet. Something's gonna happen.
Wow.
And it happens, and it happens, and then you go out, shake hands, have a beer afterwards or whatever. But I love that competitive aspect of it. And I think I've always looked at the other sports I've covered. I looked at athletes and say, could he have played hockey? Would he have been a hockey player? Chris Long, the great football player. I always thought, man, what a great defenseman he would have made. Tough guys. Michael Vick. I picture him like, man, that guy would have been something. He would have been something, man. It would have been great.
And, like when you mentioned Michael Vick, for some reason, the first person that came to mind was that he would have reminded me of a Brad Marchand type of player. Great goal scorer, but undersized, but has enough speed and skill to be able to make the maneuver on and around the ice. Now, in continuation with hockey, now that the season is coming back, and you work closely with the Philadelphia Flyers for NBC Sports Philadelphia, I'm genuinely intrigued to get your outlook for the 2020-2021 Philadelphia Flyers, because that team last season, in my humble opinion, I felt that it surprised a lot of people, especially with the first-year head coach, Alain Vigneault, coming to Philadelphia. And then you look at the emergence of key players in that team, like Kevin Hayes, his first season with the Flyers, and as well as Carter Hart, man oh man, I think he could have very easily won the Calder Trophy. What's your outlook for this team, and what is the expectation for the Philadelphia Flyers?
Well, in the first place, haven't done your homework. That's not a humble opinion. That's a pretty good opinion.
Thank you. I'm humbled by that. Thank you, honestly.
So you're right on the mark. Carter Hart is, in the first place, is a problem for me because I've not lost my accent, and it's a constant little annoying thing to the people in Philadelphia. But Carter Hart he's the real deal, and a lot of times, this goes all the way back to BU with Jackie Parker. There were times after a game, he'd say, sometimes they shouldn't call it hockey. They should just call it goalie. And that's what they have. And that gives you a chance in every game and every series. But they're a very good team. Alain Vigneault was a very, very good coach that gave some discipline to a team that, and I'm not talking about penalty discipline. I'm talking about strategy and where you are on an ice, spacing discipline on that team. It's funny. The Flyers needed that kind of a coach to come in and do that. The Sixers had the same problem with Brett Brown. I don't think he disciplined that team enough. So a veteran guy comes in and he says, okay, we're going to do it this way. So in very easy terms, you all of a sudden had a team that stayed in its lanes, and that made them a much better defensive team. And they have skilled players, kids that can score. So, I mean, that kind of dried up a bit in the playoffs, but they were a far more organized bunch. And as long as you have that goaltender, it's like you have a starting pitcher that could go out. The same pitcher could go out there every day. And that's what you should get. So they should be right in it. But boy, the way they put these divisions together, that East is going to be it's a bear to get through that. And if I were the Bruins, I'd be really worried about making the playoffs in this division right now.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you hit on it, because the East division, and when I saw the realignment that's going to be for this upcoming season, oh my God, Washington, Islanders, Philadelphia, Rangers, Pittsburgh. I mean, that is a gauntlet in itself. And that's not even talking about Tampa Bay, which is not in the East, which is like, wait, what? Yeah. Like, it's whew.
Yeah, it's great, but the way I look at it, look, I covered a 48-game season when there was labor strife. This is a nightly playoff series. Is what you have. You're going to play teams 8 times. Tempers are going to get hotter. Teams are going to see each other quicker. They're rivalries, which has driven this sport forever. Much as I love, to have the sport spread out over the continent. There were nights in Philadelphia, Winnipeg would come in, Calgary, and there just wasn't, when there were fans in the stands, there wasn't a excitement level of when the Rangers, the Islanders, the Bruins, when they came in. I really think that, with the exception of with the NFL and the NBA, where they're national stars or whatever, it really helps in hockey and baseball to know your opponent better. And even though there's going to be the one side of this kind of scale where it says there's no fans, going to suffer through that. The other side of it will be when you tune into a game, man, there's going to be an emotional pitch that's going to be like, we're already in the playoffs from jump.
And I think that kind of intensity is something that hockey hasn't really seen over the last few years. And I'm glad you mentioned the strike shortened season of 2012-13, because I remember that season being that sense of urgency. Literally every night was a must-win game, seemingly for whoever was contending in either the East or the West. And in a 56-game season, I think that one of the big storylines in terms of league-wide is going to be, especially when you look at the North Division, you got Toronto, you got Montreal, you got basically all the Canadian teams. Which team do you think is going to beat up on each other the most? Do you think Toronto can actually finally grab itself by the straps and say, hey, guys, Sheldon Keefe here speaking, I need you guys to actually tighten up defensively and not just worry about offense?
I don't know. I've heard it so much about Toronto since, I've covered the sport forever, and Toronto it's got to kill them to have the basketball success and then not have the Stanley Cup parade around and so on. I think the biggest rivals be Calgary, Edmonton, anything in the East, anything. I mean, Rangers, Islanders, Devils, Rangers. I mean, you're in New York, everybody hates you to start with. So the Rangers are going to go through chaos with kind of, although without fans, maybe not so much. But I think that, and it's so close, the travel in the East. So, of course, the battle in Alberta will be terrific. And then the battles in the East are going to be phenomenal. Yeah. It'll remind me of going back to the old days of what was called the Patrick Division. It'll be wars like Adams Division. But in those times, some teams would be out of it by Christmas. A quarter of the season gone, you would know certain teams were done. Now with the tie, the overtimes or whatever, that won't happen. So it'll even add more excitement. So this will be a wire to wire event in terms of you cannot lose a point. And when you say you're going to have 3-point games, as they used to say, 4-point games, whatever, they're going to be on a nightly basis.
I want to come back to hockey a little bit in the discussion, but I got to go to football because the Eagles. I'm shaking my head respectfully, Al, because if there's been one single team in the NFL this season that has grab headlines every single week and not for all the right reasons, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. Can you please explain to me why is Carson Wentz in such a grumpy mood and may very well demand a trade after being replaced by Jalen Hurts?
Well, but he's been terrible. I mean, to the point where you wanted him to get out of it, and everybody kept saying, "Oh, just wait a while. He will, he'll come out of this funk if it was," but he never did. And they owe him so much money, and it's kind of a shame that he hasn't really said anything. The stories have come out without him making a statement. I really think his people, as they say, his agents or whatever, should come out and say, "Look, he's supporting the team. He's doing everything that he can." But it looks like he's whining, but not through his own voice. And I understand what you're saying. I mean, Eagles fans are watching this, Jalen Hurts playing so well. And when they see the video of Carson Wentz going over to talk to him during a game, they say, "Get away from me, get away from me. They don't want anything. They want them to catch what you have." And that's where they are with this. And it's kind of gone, to me, it's gone over the top. He's having an awful year. He's been terrible, just terrible. And they probably waited too long to switch to Hurts. But there's kind of like this grave dancing going on now over a guy that really was terrific for them for a long time. And it was the Eagles that gave him the buckets of money. He didn't bring a gun in and take it. So, I mean, there's that part to it. But I can see where it's really awful for him. He's supposed to be the franchise quarterback. He was supposed to be, there was time 2 years ago, if you said everybody's a free agent, everybody out of the pool, then had a draft, he might have been the first or second guy taken. Now he can't get on the field. So he's completely frustrated, and the fans are frustrated with him. And I do not think he can come back here under this situation. I think the Eagles are going to have to eat a lot of salary because it's, what it's like. You're in Boston. It's the same thing in Philadelphia. You just don't get over something like this. This is a horrible mess that they've got right now. So they may have to just cut. Hopefully Hurts plays well through the rest of the season and just go from there. Because we're already, look, the Eagles aren't technically out of it, believe it or not. Yeah. But the conversation is all about what are they going to do with Wentz? Where's he going to go? And by the way, New England is one of the teams that most people think he could end up
intrigued.
With.
Yeah.
Or Indy. And my dark horse is Pittsburgh, where he might land or end up. So we'll see what happens with him. But it has been an amazing thing to see what's happening. And it's, as you said, it's kept the Eagles in a terrible season for them. Yeah. Like, 6 wins. If it all, all ends up right, 6 wins to get in the playoffs type of a situation. Oof. It's ridiculous, but they remain a huge story, an enormous story. And for a talk show host to go in 5 days a week and have this going on. Now people say, how can you be on the radio or TV in Philadelphia for 30 years, 20 years, 30, whatever it is, and have something to talk about every day? I said, because every day some athlete or some coach or somebody gets up and is a bigger jackass than the jackass the day before. So fun.
Oh my God. That's the strong, opinionated Al Morganti I've grown to admire from a distance for a long time. That's come out. Like, oh my God, that was great. That was great. I gotta ask you the $1 million question, because like you're the first one that who as accomplished as you are in your career, who has been in the Philadelphia sports scene for a number of years now, let's rewind the clock to 2018. If you asked and proposed, who would you prefer to have as your quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, Nick Foles or Carson Wentz? Who would you have picked and why? Because that seems to be the age-old question in Philadelphia that's even talked about even right now.
Every day. I mean, and I guess that's part of Wentz wakes up every day and goes, what do I have to do? They want Foles, they want Hurts, God. But I would have taken Wentz because of he's young, and Foles, for as much as the guy's got a statue to him already. Okay.
Yeah.
He comes in a replacement role, but he's never had gone the course. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he's had great situations, and he was terrific in the clutch, and he'll forever be beloved in Philadelphia. But there was no question in my mind that Wentz was the way to go. How this happened, that he just went south so much, I don't know. He had the concussion. A lot of people say as soon as they drafted Hurts that was that was it. In that case, you're mentally weak. I don't know how far you can go anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say I was in a large majority there. I for sure wanted Wentz. He was so good that season before. And, Foles comes in and look what happens. They win a Super Bowl in which Tom Brady might have had the best Super Bowl of his career.
He did.
And he lost. And Foles ends up winning everything is Foles. I mean, the play, the Philly special, this, that, the other thing, catch a pass. So I would have rather gone with Wentz, but believe me, you're absolutely correct. To this day, people will tell you if Wentz had come back, they wouldn't have even won that Super Bowl. So
wow.
Whenever you bring it up, you cannot bring up Wentz without having Foles brought up in the same conversation. Maybe it's better that he leaves and doesn't have that legacy, because now he's got Foles on one side, and to complete the parentheses, he's got Hurts.
Now I want to bring up something controversial, and I'm purposely going to ask because I want to see the passion and the fire that I've already seen already. I brought this point up the other day, and I said, listen, Eagle fans would have my head in Philadelphia if I ever said this. The worst thing to ever happen to this fan base was winning Super Bowl 52 in the manner in which they did, and here's why. Because Carson Wentz was on track to be the NFL MVP in 2017 prior to the injury against the Los Angeles Rams. Nick Foles taking over, and as you alluded to, the story and his legend began in that game. From that point on, taking them all the way to Super Bowl 52, winning Super Bowl 52 and the game MVP. And ever since then, it seems like Carson Wentz and the fan base has this attachment to Foles, like that was the guy that finally got us to the championship, while forgetting that this was a guy who was an MVP caliber player just 3 years ago, even 2 years ago, dare I even say. Am I crazy in this assessment or what?
Well, you can never say it's the worst thing that could have happened, because it was the best day in the Philadelphia sports fans' life was the parade. But you are right, the way it happened, really, everybody that said, if you give me a Super Bowl, I'll take hell for the next 3 years, is paying the price to Satan right now, because God heard him, and that may have been the time that that since then, and especially in the case of Carson Wentz, and I think the other mistake was they held on to people that were there too long. Jason Peters, I mean, everybody knew he was done. He'd come back, they give him money, they give guys, people that they kind of fell in love with. It's athletes anymore. It's not the old days with free agency now. Like if you love an athlete, you better love them like a girlfriend, a boyfriend, and not a spouse, because it's not forever. It's just you win and you get the heck out.
And there's something about the Eagles this season, and I have family that live in Philadelphia. Like my mother, she currently lives in South Philly, and whenever I go there, I listen to sports radio, given being a radio host myself. And the number one thing that has stood out to me is that in the 2020 Philadelphia Eagles season, there seems to be a lot of blame going around. whether if it's the construct of the roster, the offensive line, the injuries. Where would you place the blame for the team's failures for the 2020 season? Would you solely put that on the quarterback, or is it a combination of factors?
Well, the quarterback was awful. I mean, you can't get around that, but you also can't get around the fact that their drafts have been terrible. Except Hurts, which people didn't like. I mean, certainly Wentz didn't like it. Ironically, they're terrific at selecting quarterbacks, but they had receivers that they should have taken that they didn't take. They didn't help with their offensive line. There were so many other positions that they could have added depth with or whatever to give Wentz more weapons. Having said that's a damn good thing the way Hurts had started, that they did it. But they have been ill-equipped because their drafting has been so poor to put people in. The weapons that they've had have not been great. I don't think they've used their running back, Miles Sanders, as much as they probably should. But everybody likes to pass the ball. So, I mean, that's another factor. But they have not replenished their roster. And I think, and I guess more than anything, it shows you in New England when, you may have said, is it Brady, is it Belichick? And Belichick's terrific. But, when you've got a quarterback like that, you can it makes up for some mistakes.
Absolutely.
It just covers up. It's like a goalie. It just makes up. A good quarterback or a good goalie, you never really know how to judge the coach, the GM, or whatever, because there's so much that they can make up for.
And I look at the running backs. You talk about Miles Sanders and as well as Boston Scott. Their inability to run the ball at times seems to expose the Eagles' inability to be able to find the open guy, especially when Wentz was starting. And I've noticed that he's either overthrowing certain guys, or certain guys are not running the correct route to certain plays. But there was a rumor that I heard, and I don't know how true this is, that Carson Wentz was changing calls at the line of scrimmage or in the huddle. Is that true? And if so, do you think that is also partly to blame as to why Wentz has struggled so much this season?
Well, no doubt. You hear just watch, and he says kill, or he puts his hand there to kill.
Yeah.
It happens a lot now. A lot of second guessing goes on when you're failing. Basically, what Carson Wentz was at his best, he was third down. It was incredible success at third down, which is where most quarterbacks let's face it, it's where most quarterbacks make their reputation. You're going to get first or second. You got to get your running backs warmed up. So first and second sometimes is going to always lead with 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, whatever. Mm-hmm. And 2 years ago, he was fabulous at third down. This year was just might as well punt on third down. That's how bad it was. Oof. And that's what's happened. And the coach just won't stick with a running game. And I know a lot is made of that everywhere because the NFL is such a passing league now. Yeah. But they do have a legitimate runner in Sanders. And sometimes you got to let that engine warm up a little bit, let it fail a couple of times. And they've disbanded it so often. But he's already broken some big runs. And now they've got a quarterback that comes in, and Jalen Hurts, maybe it's because they don't have film on him, as they say, or whatever, but on third down, he's magic. And that's the difference. You can be awful on 2, and if you're magic on 3, you're going to get through.
For sure. Do you think Doug Peterson or Howie Roseman survives this season in return in 2021? And if not, which one do you think ends up being relieved of his duties?
I don't think either one. I think the fact that I think they may change sort of. They've got a lot of voices going on, but for Doug Peterson to not survive with his quarterback playing the way he did, and they may end up in the playoffs, believe it or not. Yeah. But and Howie Roseman is so tight with Jeffrey Lurie, the owner. I think there may be a change in who's got the biggest input on draft day. There may be more voices heard than Roseman, but I'm not looking. The biggest change will be the quarterback, I believe. I'd be really surprised if next year at training camp that Carson Wentz is in Philadelphia.
I would be surprised because I just don't see, even though Jalen Hurts played well and was not the reason why the Eagles did not beat the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday, that it seems to be that he is the guy moving forward. And I'll ask you, looking ahead to 2021, and as you mentioned, the Eagles might make the playoffs, but realistically, I just don't see it. honestly speaking.
Yeah.
But in 2021, what is your prediction in terms of how the offense may look with Jalen Hurts being the starting quarterback? There's a pretty strong chance he may very well be the starter. And do you think a change in offensive philosophy may further unearth the potential that Jalen Hurts has?
I do. I think there'll be more I guess quarterback runs that are you're supposed to have. Run pass option.
Yeah.
The run pass option with Wentz was how many you want to lose, 3 or 5. That was the option. So now you've got, an option that really does work. So I do think that will be the change. Now, it's awful early to crown this guy. I mean, how many quarterbacks have been crowned after 2 games? Like, this is
true.
But boy, he really has been terrific. And the difference with him is, going back to hockey, Carter Hart had an amazing amateur career with a lot of pressure with Team Canada and the juniors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just saying because it was Alabama and Oklahoma that Hurts played for. I'm saying because he was replaced.
Yeah.
He's gone through so much. I mean, as much as Wentz might not be happy with being the focal point of being replaced. It sounds dumb because it's the NFL, but I think it was a bigger deal to be replaced at Alabama.
For sure.
and then have
by
to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then to have to come back and deal with it, and then go somewhere else and deal with what happened before. So I think he's mentally, there's no crumbling that's going to go on there. So I think he's ahead in that stage. God knows if he's going to be what we all expect right now, but I think that they will tailor an offense to him far more since he's come on. I mean, Carson Wentz used to look like he get out there running. He was a big guy. It's like, he's a face of the future. Well, now he looks slow with what's going on. What we see in Baltimore, what we see in Kansas City, what we see with Mahomes, and what we saw with Kyler Murray. It's Russell Wilson's impact on everything we've seen it, and it looks like all of a sudden how it happened, how Carson Wentz went from a Ferrari to a Subaru, but that's what happened.
Yeah. It's crazy how the NFL works, especially when it comes to starting quarterbacks. And if anything else, I think the number one intriguing story in Philadelphia this winter, in my opinion, and I'm interested in your opinion on this one. The Philadelphia Sixers, for months before this whole Eagles debacle, they were seemingly the story after their debacle in the NBA playoffs against the Boston Celtics. They let go of Brett Brown. The conversation involving, was Ben Simmons the problem? Is he going to fit with Joel Embiid? They go out and they bring in Doc Rivers. So my question to you is, do you think Doc Rivers is the solution for the Philadelphia 76ers? And can Ben Simmons coexist with Joel Embiid?
I think so. I mean, I'm a bigger Simmons fan, I guess, than a lot of people. I mean, I would not trade him for Harden what's being reported. And don't forget, there's a new GM that I think
Daryl Moore. Yes.
Yeah. I think he relates more to people than we've had previously. I find that there's a bigger comfort level right now. Brett Brown it was a very difficult thing to ask a guy to be the head of a team that was basically tanking, to have some of those players continue with him and then all of a sudden try to win every night. I don't think it works. I think the message that you sent earlier is very difficult to change it as the head coach.
Yeah.
I think Brett Brown did a good job in bringing people along with Embiid and everything they went through with injuries and guys not playing and this whole process thing was just, my God, they put Brett Brown out there every night to take the bullets. And I never met a guy Brett Brown just couldn't stop talking. I mean, no matter, he would talk himself around in circles to try to get around the fact that they were trying to lose. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, now I'm changing my message. Well, you're the same guy. So
Yeah.
I really think I have high expectations with Doc Rivers coming in and the new general manager, that the message has certainly changed from the top to the locker room.
What's your expectations for the 2020-2021 Philadelphia Sixers, given the East and in some ways, I guess you could say the new look East, especially with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant returning healthy for the Brooklyn Nets?
Well, good luck to Brooklyn. I mean, I don't want any part of that. I mean, how this guy gets off even saying that, we're artists. I'm like, you're artists? What the hell are you talking about? I mean, I don't know what I don't know that he's gonna. I think he hurts, but I'm worried. I think certainly Milwaukee with they're all settled now for their future.
Yeah.
Miami with the guy that, boy, Philadelphia still misses this Jimmy Butler, man. It was,
man, yeah.
It was that guy. I talked earlier about the guys that could play hockey. He's boy, he's got something that I think he saw in Philadelphia what was missing, and he can be a bit of a jerk at times, but when he was kind of letting it be known like there's got to be a different attitude here, he was right.
Yeah.
And he tried to get the people to march quicker in that locker room, Embiid probably especially. Mm-hmm. And I think they'll be right in it. I mean, who knows where Harden ends up, and if that changes the dynamics of anything. But I think it'll be the usual suspects come to the end. But I think the Sixers will be better served. I think this coach will have them play their roles certainly better. And
sure.
You've got Howard, you've got guys that have come in that you can lean on a little bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think they get suckered again by Danny Ainge. If Danny Ainge's phone number shows up in Philadelphia, you just don't even pick up the damn cell phone. Because he played you for the fool. I don't know how many times. So just let it go. Don't get involved and don't try to ruin worry about your own team. Don't try to take something away from the Celtics. So I think it's a coaching upgrade, and that should certainly help. And again, although people think the Sixers have done a 180, they've sort of actually done a 360, because the year when they went to Toronto, got beat by the double doink or whatever it was.
Yep.
They were a team that had shooters, and then they went away from it, and now they've come back and they've got shooters around Embiid and Simmons. And you can forget trying to get Simmons. He's not going to take the 3-pointer that everybody keeps saying, oh, the light's going to dawn on him. No, you might as well try to teach a pig to play the piano. It ain't happening. He's not going to do it. So just be happy that you have a probable all-star for the next half decade, just on the basis of his defensive play and his ability to drive and get the ball to somebody else that will. So the more intelligent thing they've done, well, maybe we'll get guys that can shoot that he'll get the ball to. And that's where I think you're going to go. But he has to be better in the playoffs at crunch time.
Absolutely.
You cannot be a player that the other team can just disregard. And that's what the Celtics did to him a couple of years ago.
And you look at there's one addition in particular the Sixers made, and that was they bring in Dwight Howard, fresh off winning an NBA title. He's a former Defensive Player of the Year. And I think to myself, I said, if there is one area of concern that I have for the Sixers, and that is their ability to defend and make key defensive stops in important points of the game. And I ask you, if you're the Philadelphia Sixers under Doc Rivers, how much trust are you putting on the head coach to institute a system in which that you get everybody involved on the defensive side of the court? Because you know what they can do offensively with the players that they have.
Well, I think that's where their strength is going. That's why that coaching change will matter. It's just like we mentioned about Lane Vigneault coming in, stay in your lane, do this, do that. And when you bring in a Howard, there's two different scenarios with bringing in former stars, shall we say, guys that are on the other side of a lot of guys can't adapt. They can't adapt to the role. This guy can adapt to the role. It's very rare to get a guy of that skill level that can say, I'll just do what you need me to do. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do, which they've already gone through with a number of guys. You tell me what you need me to do. Yeah. You're an experienced coach, and I'll do it. That's what I think they have in Howard.
Now, the Phillies are in the midst of their offseason, in which that there were a lot of people, including myself, who raised eyebrows when they announced that they were going to bring in Dave Dombrowski as the new president of baseball operations in Philadelphia. Coming off a season in which that, listen, the last 2 years, I've looked at the Phillies and said to myself, this is a team that has a talent to get to the postseason, but they have underachieved. Why do you think that is? And as well as, do you see bigger things for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2021 under Joe Girardi as manager?
Well, yeah, bigger. Well, it'd be bigger things because they were bad last year, and the biggest reason was they had a terrible bullpen, which they didn't address well.
Yeah.
The people that Matt Klentak brought in were worse than the people that they had, and one of them was from Boston, the Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that Dombrowski should be better at that. If you're thinking that they're going to give Dombrowski the blank check that he's had elsewhere in Boston, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't even know that they'll sign Real Muto, but they will be able to address things there, because I think Dombrowski, even though he's old, my age, I think he still has an awareness of what's going on in baseball. You don't have to be, I think everybody's chased the 29-year-old Stanford or Harvard or wherever grad. I mean, that doesn't automatically put you, where you want to be.
Yeah.
I think I think they now have a guy with Girardi that will be able to use analytics and go out and just use their eyes to see who's a better relief pitcher or whatever. And I don't know that Dombrowski's going to get him to the playoffs this year. I don't know that he's going to have a checkbook that's going to allow him to do that. But I do know the additions that they make should be way better than what Klentak made here. And I think that his voice, look, the Phillies had a problem, is that Matt Klentak just didn't relate. And certainly their manager previously did not relate at all.
Yeah.
And he played in Boston, Kapler. He was a terrific player, but their analytic approach, you can have analytics, but you can't stress them. It takes a fan base out of the game. If I go to a concert, I don't want to see the notes of the music all night. I want to hear the music.
Yes.
And these guys just would bring us along this angle, that. I'm like, please, I want to enjoy the home run or whatever. And every explanation was like, this pitcher after 2 times look what happened in the World Series, taking a pitcher out after 2 times. What was that? What is that about? I mean, everybody that's ever played Little League ball is screaming and going, what are you doing? Don't tell me about the numbers behind this. I am not watching this for numbers. And if there are numbers involved, and I'm not saying there aren't, don't make them the headline. You will absolutely alienate yourself from people watching the game to see players do what they can't do.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I annihilated Kevin Cash the next day. Like, when, let me have a moment to just recalibrate my mind a little bit. Game 6, you're down 3-2 to the Dodgers. Blake Snell is cruising beautifully through the game. I mean, dominating. Struck out 9 through that first 6 innings of the game. And for some inexplicable reason, he gives up the lead-up single. I'm like, okay, no big deal. Tampa's still up 1-0 in the game on a Randy Arozarena leadoff home run. Suddenly, you see Kevin Cash coming out. I'm like, wait, what are you doing? No. We're going to the bullpen. And I'm like, they just lost the World Series right there. I said it out loud. They lost the World Series right then and there. And I said the next day, I said, analytics has destroyed baseball on so many fronts. And I'll even ask you this, as someone who has seen a lot in your lifetime, has seen a lot in baseball, in more ways than one, do you think that analytics has destroyed the bare necessities and the bare minimums of the ability to evaluate a player based on his strengths or weaknesses?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And I give Theo Epstein credit for pointing it out when he left Chicago, that the sport has a problem that way. And again, I'm not against knowledge. I mean, I'm not. Here's the thing. At my age, you learn things. There's knowledge and there's wisdom. Don't disregard wisdom because you think you have all this knowledge. When you make a move like he made in the World Series, and here's the key to this, on Twitter, on whatever social media platform you're on, athletes from every sport were thoroughly amazed at that move. Athletes,
Yes.
I'm not talking about athletes from every sport could see that and say, that is wrong. It's wrong. And you're saying for no apparent, there was apparent reason. The numbers said to take him out because he's going through the lineup a third time, what had happened previously. But when every athlete from the NHL, or not every, but many athletes from every different one checked in before the disaster and said exactly what you said, this ain't going to end well, it ain't going to end well. And I think people are starting to learn, let's just chill a little bit on it. Just because the degree's on the wall, you got this. It's still played by humans, the game.
And I think that I feel like when you look at sports and analytics, and I feel like analytics does have a role, it's there to inform, not serve as a guide. And in switching over to hockey, because you see analytics not as a majority, but as a small tool in evaluating like forwards or defensemen or even a goalie for that fact of the matter. Do you see the Flyers, for example, using analytics as a tool to inform and as a way to scout future prospects that they want to draft into the organization?
Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty open to it. I just don't think it should rule everything. I mean, if I know a guy, defensive zone faceoffs, entry level, successful entries. Now, these are things you can chart, but don't highlight. And by the way, the media is at fault for a lot of this too, by cluttering the screen with all of this stuff during a game.
Oh yeah,
I don't need it. I mean, it feeds into it. And the only way it really would intrude, and this is where you can see that some of these things aren't as valuable as you think. If the stat doesn't turn into more money for the player, it ain't that important. That's basic. If your launch angle, if you can't go to the general manager and say, look at my launch angle, I want a raise. But if you launch the ball out of the ballpark, you might get a raise. Now that's a different analytic. That's getting you runs.
Yeah.
This is where I have a real problem with it. But no, I'd use it for as a coach. I'm looking, okay, his successful zone entries as a forward coming in or a defenseman, who he's playing with. That's all knowledge. It's all you put a fancy name on it. But now the names get carried. They just get carried away.
Who do you see as the biggest challenge to the Flyers in the Eastern Division this upcoming season? Do you think it's Washington, Pittsburgh, or even the up-and-coming Rangers, who, by the way, they now have a terrific young core of players like the newly drafted Alexis Lafreniere, Capocacco, and as well as Artemi Panarin, who could possibly have won the Hart Trophy last season?
I think the Rangers are going to be way better, although they lost. I mean, now. The Kings' career might be over. I don't know. In Washington, that's kind of a blow for them.
Yeah.
But I think the Islanders, I mean, people want to overlook the Islanders. The Islanders are a really good team, very well coached, and short season. I suspect that they're under the radar again. And I think, and they give the Flyers fits.
Yeah.
So I think if I were the Flyers, I'd do anything to avoid that team. That's the team that I would, as you're looking beyond the division, you obviously have Tampa there, but the Islanders would be one of the closest one that I'd worry about.
If you look at the West, for example, I mean, this season there's no Western Conference, but just for traditional sake.
Yeah, we got the Great White North, and
But let's look at the West, for example. You look at teams out there. You look at teams like Colorado, for example.
Yeah.
And you look at Dallas, who just made it to the Cup final last season, and you look at all of the contenders that are out there in the West, including Vegas. I can't forget about the Vegas Golden Knights as well. Which division in the West do you look at, or which team in the West do you look at and you say that team right now has a legitimate chance to go to the Cup final?
Colorado got hammered by injuries last year at the end. Yeah. McKinnon, they've got such terrific high-end talent. Look like they're disciplined, well coached. So it would be Colorado a lot, and Vegas is right there with them. There's so many good teams, but it would be, I think Colorado, of all the teams that got kind of waylaid last year by injury and by the whole situation, I think that they may be one. This might be the year that it happens for them. I thought it was going to be last year, but I think it'll be pushed to this year.
And in terms of, I want to talk about your career, because I had the chance to read up about your experience being a sports writer. You know, you're working for the Times. You did work for the LA Times as well, and also working in all these markets. What is the number one experience that you've earned over time and learning about the passion of sports fans in those different cities?
Well, I guess I've worked Philly, Atlanta, Florida, Boston. The fans are interested in people. Those are the stories that always connect. Drama. You got to have drama, and if it's not a game day, it's got to be the stories about the people. That's what makes it different. I mean, it's much as during this pandemic, people say that they've enjoyed Netflix or whatever. If sports is really going on the way it was, and when you watch a great game or whatever, there ain't no Queen's Gambit that can match it. It's just not happening. Yeah. Stuff happens in sports all the time, that even in Philadelphia, you mentioned the Eagles, all the stuff going on. You look at games, there's been Monday night games in football this year. There's been crazy Sunday night games that have been nuts. Yeah. You see all that going on. I think it's just the drama of what goes on. Sports gambling has added to it somewhat, but I think that it's by far just, you don't know what's going to happen. It's not scripted. It's something new every night, and that it's changed a little bit. The newer sports fan isn't as invested in the teams. I do think that they actually are a smarter fan. They're looking at other things. They see more of they know everything about, because of all the platforms that you have. You know more about players. It used to be, the writers on a certain team would know about the whole league. Well, now, it's a pretty educated fan base that knows pretty much, and they've kind of focused on one sport. Like, there are people that just follow the NBA, people that just follow the NHL. They know everything about those leagues, way more than they used to. If you were a sports writer covering the Bruins, you knew more about the Edmonton Oilers than 90% of your Bruins fans. Well, now with the internet and everything that goes on, how quickly you can get it, if you're really interested, and many people are, they know everything. Fans now, if they're really into it, if you're a big Celtics fan, if you're a big Bruins fan, you know about the kids coming up. That never happened, except for Bobby Orr back in the day. But that didn't happen. Now you can keep your eye on it all the time. So you do have I find, a far more educated fan base about what's going on.
Between the professional leagues, between the MLB, NBA, NHL, and NFL, which sports league are you most passionate about?
Well, I'm a hockey guy. For me, college hockey, any hockey, the international hockey. I love the game. I can watch pond hockey. That's basically, I will always, if the Super Bowl's on and there's a hockey game, unless it's a team I'm in the city with, I'm probably watching a hockey game. More so maybe than a player. I find it, I just fell in love with it early. And then I think baseball's made some huge mistakes. The NFL is just a machine that it just rolls over everything. It's what soccer, I guess, is in Europe. It just rolls. Everybody gets what's left over. That's the way it runs. And I'm not so sure after all this is over, the NBA and the NHL won't say we have to start later anyway, just get away from the NFL. So, I admire their ability to just succeed and from a weekly put on a show without treating the players as well as they should be treated. Their union is the weakest of all. So I guess I admire the NFL's economics and their model and how they do it, but I admire the actual game. I like hockey better than any.
Any plans on watching the upcoming World Juniors that's slated to start?
Oh yeah, I watch it every Christmas. I'm happy they're having it with what's going on.
Same.
I watch Carter Hart through that. I've watched so many of those. Look at the age that these hockey players come in. By the time Sean Couturier is in Philadelphia. By the time Carson Wentz, they're the same age. Couturier played like 600 games, and Wentz was playing one. So wow. That's how young. that's how young they are. I mean, when you look at Chara, you come in at 18 and you go out at 36, that's half your life you spent playing the sport. And it's not unusual for a very good player to do it. Yeah. So, I mean, I watch the World Juniors, and I'm not watching guys that are 3 years away. I'm watching guys that in 2 years, you're going to be my goalie.
Exactly. And one of the things that I absolutely love about hockey is, you know, we watch tournaments like the World Juniors, or even when hockey is involved with the Olympics, there's something about international competition that just seems to get the best out of like NHL prospects that are playing in these tournaments. Now, with the NHL slated to return to the Olympics in I believe 2022, what is one thing that you're looking forward to the most when you see NHL players like represent their countries in the Olympic tournament?
Well, Team USA, but I got to say, I'm not a fan of the NHL being in the Winter Olympics. I find it a huge mistake to shut down your season and kind of genuflect to another tournament. I think the Stanley Cup tournament's the best tournament in the world. And I know that the players love it, and I understand you want to play for your country. Why you can't play it in the Summer Olympics is beyond me. But halting a season for it, I think, is a huge mistake. I don't think it gains you any fans. For me as a hockey fan, I'm going to watch, but I'm already a hockey fan. For those that are watching otherwise, this happens every time they play. What great hockey. Then the NHL starts to go, I can't watch that after watching the Olympics. Well, you're watching the best players, the handful of best players in the world. It's not going to be the same. And if the game doesn't involve your country, you're probably bored to death because there's the lack of physicality on that ice, on that surface. So I'll always root for USA, Team USA. I disagree, and I'm a very distinct minority in it. I don't like interrupting an NHL season to go play in another tournament.
I'm surprised because, like, personally, I never looked at it that way. I always viewed it as like this is an opportunity for players for 2 weeks or even 3 weeks at a time go represent their countries and represent their teams playing in the Olympics, and you get to see the NHL on a global stage where it'll attract more fans. And
it never has, though. How many years? I mean, it's like for years I was a kid. Communism was going to take over the hillsides. It never did. So it's not. It's not going to soccer. Oh yeah, I put soccer on. Where do you see? Well, no, it's not here. You see it? Yeah. I don't see it. I mean, the women, sure, but not the men. And make no mistake, if I were a player, I would do anything to go play in the Olympics and play for my country. I'm talking as a fan. Yeah. If I'm a Flyer fan or a Bruin fan, I don't like halting that season for 2 weeks, risking injury to go play in that tournament where I got one guy for one team, one guy, and I don't find it that big a fan experience, except in Canada, which is crazy. But that's the NFL in Canada. They're already, you're not gonna get a bigger pool of fans because of that.
And like there is an example that supports your point about a player potentially getting injured. It happened in 2014. I'm sure you may remember John Tavares, who was the captain of the New York Islanders at the time. He got injured for Team Canada. I believe he broke his leg during that tournament. Yeah.
It's a risky, it's risky business, and you got to, they've done their insurance things, and let's face it, you're going to play in China. You're going to sell a lot of shirts.
Without question.
So you basically said, look, we're turning the league into a dry goods company for this couple, and that's what you have. They need the money, so good on them for doing it. I just I miss the NHL during that time.
And last question I'll ask you, looking at this upcoming season and the sprint that is going to be going into the Stanley Cup playoffs, do you have a dark horse team that you say that you don't think much of now, but could make noise as the season progresses and possibly make noise come the Stanley Cup playoffs?
I don't know. When you have the best player in the game, it's hard to say you're a dark horse team, but I think Edmonton's a dark horse team. When you really look at it, and I'm basing it on he's the best player in the game they got going on there, and so that would be my dark horse, which sounds odd with you've got the star player, you've got the Gretzky of his era, but they haven't done anything. So I'd look at them as my dark horse team.
It's been an absolute privilege and a thrill to have you on the podcast, Al Morganti of NBC Sports Philadelphia, 94.1 WIP. I had a blast talking hockey and all sorts of sports with you, and I look forward to possibly doing this again with you down the road for sure.
Anytime, no worries.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.